Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are just letting some people in, and we will get started in just a second. Okay, so welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who are listening in on your phone, please let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and phone number that you're dialing in from. This way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive all of the relevant follow-up after the webinar. If you are new to Cancer and Careers, we are a national nonprofit and the only program of its kind solely dedicated to empowering and educating people with cancer to thrive in their work environment. This is a list of all of our free programs and services we offer. Our comprehensive website, available in both English and Spanish, is the heart of everything we do. There you can find various support services, including our resume review service and access to career coaches. Our educational blog and newsfeed are both rich resources where those who have been diagnosed, their caregivers, employers, and healthcare professionals can stay current on topics related to work and cancer. Our free publication library, available in both English and Spanish, provides tangible, easy to digest information on working and looking for work after a cancer diagnosis in both hard copy and PDF formats. We also offer numerous events every year, from hour-long webinars like the one that we are about to watch today to full-day events. And I'll be back at the end of the presentation to tell you a little bit more about what we have coming up. Now, for those of you who are requesting continuing education credits, this slide lists all of the organizations we have accredited who have accredited today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also located on our website, and a link to the evaluation and post-test will be shared at the conclusion of the webinar, so please take a moment to complete that at that point. However, if you're not able to do that today, that's totally fine. You'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow, Thursday, December 7th by 5 p.m. Eastern with all of that information in it as well. Also, for those of you who are planning to request continuing education credits, our accrediting bodies require us to share this slide and let you know there are no conflicts of interest to report. Now, as many of you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features which you can use to interact today. There's a chat box in your features panel. Feel free to use that to communicate with our speaker today, our staff, or other attendees. However, it's important to note that the chat box is not private and will show your first and last name. So that's something to be mindful of when and if you're deciding to engage in the chat. There's also a Q&A box. After Ariane presents today, we'll have time for some questions. So please put those into the Q&A box, not the chat box. And we know the importance of privacy, so there is the option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box. Now, thanks in part to support from Genentech and QVC, Cancer and Careers is proud to offer the 9th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series, which was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched with cancer with concise, targeted information about work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. Additionally, we'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers as year-round sponsors who support all of our core programming and allow us to continue providing all resources and services free of charge. Now, knowing how to market yourself is invaluable in a job search. Having an awareness of who you are and what skills and accomplishments you bring to the table is key, as is being able to clearly communicate that to a potential employer. To walk us through today's presentation, we are honored to welcome speaker and coach Ariane Hunter. She has worked with industry leaders, including Women in STEM Leadership at Stony Brook University, Women's Catalyst Group at Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, and many more. She's spoken at the NYU Stern Women in Business, Advancing Women in Tech, Emerging Leaders for New York Arts, to name a few. She's also a published writer whose work has appeared on Time.com, IV Exec, and The Muse. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ariane. Welcome so much.
Hello, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for that warm welcome. Thank you all for being here, for carving the next hour or so out of your day to join in this discussion. We have a lot to get through today. So it's my honor and my pleasure to be here with you and spend this time together. Advanced slide, please. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today? So this discussion is dedicated to how to market yourself in the job search and beyond. This is a critical skill that we will need to hone and really polish, no matter what stage of our careers or what point we are in our job search. It's always great to be able to understand how we can better market ourselves, to position ourselves in front of employers, particularly as we're going through a diagnosis or particularly challenging time within our careers and within our lives, and how to really navigate that conversation successfully. So that's what we're going to go through today. Next slide. All right, so getting into the heart of it, what are we going to be covering today? So we're really going to focus in on the overview of a personal brand. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the importance of having a personal brand, right? We're going to talk about how to identify your own unique value proposition, right? So in a crowded marketplace, how do you really set yourself apart, right? We're going to talk a little bit about creating your brand statement, how to create an effective and impactful brand statement that really speaks to employers and speaks to networking, as well as your resume. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to cover your networking strategy and elevator pitch, right? So some of these things are crucial to navigating your job search, because so we're going to talk about the importance of having a strong networking strategy and how to really position yourself when it comes to delivering your elevator pitch, whether it's in front of an employer or a new networking content. We're also going to talk about content creation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this because this is also an important pillar of your job search and of your personal brand overall. And then we're going to tie it all together. How do we use this strategy to navigate our job search effectively? Next slide, please. Okay, so our audience today, we are, a diverse audience of compromising cancer, whether you're a cancer patient, a survivor, a healthcare professional, caregivers for your friends and family. Our audience today is as diverse as the sunset, right? So together, I want us to really set the intention that we're going to have this conversation to share a common purpose. And that is, how to navigate, unique challenges that arise, when it comes to your personal journey. How do you, really elevate your personal brand in the face of adversity? So this is not just a discussion on your brand, right? It's really about a conversation on how you can really tailor your experience, right, to really rise above and, build a personal brand that is based on resilience and really honing in on your dreams. So that is the intention that I want to set for us today, and just really having that in mind as we talk about our personal brand. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm sure for many of us here, when it comes to your personal brand, right, we've all heard this before. It's become sort of a buzzword in the career industry. But I really want to check in with you and ask, when it comes to your personal brand, right, I want you to share it in the chat. What comes to mind when you think about your personal brand? What comes to mind? What are some words that you would use to describe your personal brand? Just a few seconds to fill it in the chat. Creative, okay. 30-second commercial, yes, absolutely. Passionate, supportive. I love these. Yeah, keep them coming, keep them coming. This is really great. So what I want us to kind of understand here when it comes to our personal brand, right? It's really about the narrative that you define for yourself, particularly in the face of adversity, right? Particularly in the face of, resilience in your professional journey. And how do you craft that narrative in a way that's impactful and really articulates your value and what you bring to the table. So when it comes to your personal brand, it's really about a powerful tool that you can create that helps you navigate the professional landscape with strength and purpose, right? I kind of like to think of our personal brand as the anchor, right? That really grounds you into sort of the foundation of your career goals. So we're going to delve a little bit more into personal branding and how it becomes a beacon of resilience in your career. Starting with, why does it matter? Next slide, please. So in my experience, personal branding is often an overlooked place for most, but it's essential when it comes to developing your career. So earlier I mentioned, personal branding is the foundation in which you build your career. I like to think of it as the North Star, right? Because it encompasses so much. It encompasses how you deliver the narrative, for who you are, the value that you bring. It provides the color and the language of your full experience, really articulating your value and how you communicate your professional identity. So when it comes to your personal brand, this is going to be impactful for when it comes to networking, interviewing, your online presence overall. It's going to help you decide whether or not a job opportunity is the right fit for you versus if it's not, or if it's aligned with your values and your future career goals, right? So it's really about articulating, the uniqueness of you, right? There's no one else on the planet that has your distinct experience and has walked the career path that you have and has walked the life path that you have. No one else has your experiences in the way that you do, right? So this is a time to really lean into that, right? Lean into the things that make you different. Lean into the things that bring value to employers, right? And again, using it as that North Star to guide and navigate different opportunities, right? And different experiences that you might have, right? And really sort of align with what your career dreams are. Right? So with that said, there, is an important point when it comes to discussing your personal brand, right? Particularly when you are navigating interviews or networking conversations. How do you handle disclosure, right? And disclosure decisions. Next slide, please. So when it comes to your brand, right, and to the job search, right, disclosing a cancer diagnosis, right, is a very personal choice, right? So this is part of your professional identity, right? And it is yours to define whether or not you want to disclose that or not. So when you're crafting your personal brand and putting those ingredients, those elements together, it's important to find a balance that feels comfortable to you, right? A balance that showcases your resilience, your professional prowess, your experiences, and also respects your privacy, right? So when navigating a cancer diagnosis, again, it's going to be deeply personal. So knowing what the decisions are around that requires self-reflection, right? To understand a little bit more about what feels right for you, what feels comfortable, right? And not feeling the pressure in order to do that. So consider that delicate balance, right? How much do you want to disclose? How much do you want to share, right? And again, making that decision your own, right? So again, this is that opportunity to showcase your resilience, to articulate your career story. A cancer diagnosis does not have to completely, consume that story. It can be an element, a part of, and again, as much as you want to share around that. But it's really about an empowering piece, for you to decide how much of your journey you want to share as part of your personal brand. So again, focusing on your skills, your dedication to your industry, and your unique approach. Again, these are all the ingredients that makes your personal brand come to life, right? So when you think about articulating your professional narrative, I encourage you to think about it as a celebration, right? As, a journey that does not define you, right? But embracing your power to really define how you want to disclose any decisions, right? And doing so with your own personal comfort towards sharing what feels comfortable to you. Okay, so with that said, I want to share a few examples, right? So personal branding is a storytelling exercise, right? It's how you communicate your story. So in context, right, it's navigating a career change or telling your story. How did you get to where you are today, right? What inspired you to pursue your desired field, right? What is the story that you want to tell, right? So looking at a few examples here, starting with Delia, right? So Delia started out as a director of Women's Business Center. She was a COO, right, to now transitioning into a COO of an African-based touring company. Arisha was a high school student that turned into an actress, right? So really telling the story of how she was able to pivot within her career in education to now being on the screen. Priscilla, so she started out her career as an executive director, right? And then transitioned into becoming a speaker and a thought leader and even an author, as well as Laura, starting her career out as an account director, right? And transitioning and pivoting her career as a public relations specialist, right? So you can see, how from the context of where you're starting and how you want to pull those experiences into a new career direction. So it's really, the sky is the limit as you think about articulating your career story and how will it impact the work that you want to do. So really encourage you to dream big here. Career pivoting is how you leverage your unique background, right? Any previous work history, experiences that you have, both personal and professional, right? As you articulate that story, your value comes to life, your story comes to life, and it will resonate with the employers and organizations that it's meant to, right? And it'll align with your career goals and your career decisions. Right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. First, I want to start with, next slide, please. Why do you need a brand, right? So it might be easy to say, I'm not, in a senior level position, or I'm not a product. Why exactly do I need a brand in my career, right? Well, the thing is we can coast our way throughout our career without putting intentional effort into building out our brand, right? But without being intentional, whether you realize it or not, we all have brands. We all are walking around with a personal brand, right? So part of being a personal brand is how others perceive you. So this is an opportunity for you to really take control of the narrative and really define and set that intention of how you want to be perceived. What is it that you want your employers, future employers, to know about you? So really taking charge of that narrative, right? So it's shown that 74% of the population are more likely to trust someone who has an established personal brand. One of the first things that employers are going to do when you submit your application is they're going to Google you. They're going to look you up on LinkedIn, right? So you want to make sure that the results that you're seeing on LinkedIn and on Google are the results that you want employers to see. So when you do have a well thought out personal brand, that shows in the eyes of the employer that you are serious about your career platform. You are serious about the brand story that you're telling, right? And the value that you want to articulate. Right? So effective networking, interviewing, it's easy to recognize your value when you have a clearly defined brand, right? And so you may have heard this before, people do business with people that they know, like, and trust, right? So the more you establish your brand is the more you're able to build out that credibility and build out that trust, all right? Let's start with an example. Next slide, please. So it might be helpful to start with an analogy from the corporate brand space, right? So when you think about a corporate brand, whether it's Pepsi, Walmart, right? These are the way customers identify and recognize the experience of your business, right? So Target, for example, what's the image that you see in your head when I say Target, the department store? Besides being a company that always steals my money when I want to go in for just one thing and end up going out with hundreds of dollars of things, right? But Target has spent a lot of money to build their brand so that it's recognizable, right, in the consumer's eye. Exactly, Daphne, the logo, right? So they did a really great job in defining themselves as a corporate brand, right? So with that said, next slide, please. When you think about your favorite brands, right? What comes to mind? Just throw it in the chat. What are your favorite brands and why? Oh, I don't recognize that one. Okay, THX. Amazon, yes, they've definitely taken a lot of my money over the years. Starbucks, love their vanilla lattes. You know, it's funny, I always ask this question when I'm having this presentation, and always one person out of the group says Patagonia. So I would have to agree, Patagonia is an amazing, amazing brand, very values driven as well. Right. And there's some emerging brands coming onto the scene as well. There's been a lot of changes just within our economy and within the market and socially over the last, couple of years. Right. So new brands, new corporate brands are emerging as well. Right. So it's important to see how those brands are presenting themselves and what are some clues that we can take when we develop our own personal brand. So next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the golden circle, right? So who here has heard of Simon Sinek? Just drop in the chat. Yes, you've heard of him, never heard of the guy. No answer is the wrong answer. Just curious if you've heard this guy before. But Simon Sinek he developed this framework of the golden circle, right? So that's what we're looking at here. So the outer circle representing the what, right? So that's your skills, that's your expertise, that's what you do, right? That's the output of what you do. Maybe you're an engineer, maybe you're a programmer, right? You develop code, that is the output of what you do, right? And then we move towards the middle of the circle and we see the how, right? So that's the process, right? That's your unique approach to how you solve problems, to how you deliver results, right? And then we get to the inner circle, which is the sweet spot. And that is your purpose. That's the why, right? That is the thing that gets you out of bed every morning. That comes with passion, excitement, enthusiasm, right? So typically, when it comes to how we define our brands, a lot of us tend to start with the what, okay? I am a programmer. I am a career coach, right? I'm an author, right? That's what you do, right? But why do you do what you do? Right? So really taking the time to reflect on what is the thing that gets you out of bed every morning, right? Your brand statement, your personal brand, and how you showcase that, right, is inspired by this circle. It becomes a melody of how you deliver your unique promise and your purpose. All of these ingredients come together, right, to create your personal brand, right? So always thinking about the why, right, behind what you do, right? So let's look at a few examples. Starting with, next slide, please. The cancer and careers example, right? So let's apply the golden circle method to the cancer and careers why, right? The why here is very clear, right? It's a mission-driven purpose, right? And that's to empower and educate people with cancer in the workplace, right? So when you read that statement, it becomes very, very clear what cancer and careers stand for, their mission, how they do what they do, and why. Right? So Cancer and Careers empowers and educates people with cancer to thrive in the workplace by providing expert advice, interactive tools, and educational events, right? So again, as we delve into building out your personal brand, we'll start to see, why, right, is the distinguishing factor that sets you apart from another programmer or another engineer, right? So not everybody's going to have the same why as you do, right? So it's important to really flesh that out, right? So again, this is going to be your guiding star, your North Star, right? That helps to fuel your career path. And we're going to see why. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with a little example. I always like to give this example to sort of really, articulate how that golden circle and getting to the why of your brand statement is so important, right? So let's start with the water bottle example, right? So what if I told you today, I'm quitting my job to go sell water bottles, right? That's just, this career coaching thing has been great, but I'm going to switch gears and go sell water bottles now. What if I said that to you? You'd probably look at me a little nuts, like, oh, okay, you have been spending a number of years in your career. Why would you suddenly pivot to selling water bottles? You probably think I'm a little nuts, right? But next slide, please. What if I told you that I'm infuriated by climate change, and I want to do something about it, right? And by selling reusable water bottles, then my mission becomes backed by a purpose, right? So do you see the difference there, right? When you really hone into, I'm not just selling water bottles here, right? This is my opportunity to really make a change, when it comes to the things that frustrate me, just climate change, right? So this may not be a big thing to change climate change in this world, right? But it's my step that I can take to feel aligned with a greater purpose, right? That I feel aligned to, right? So these are the things that I would encourage you to look at, when it comes to defining what is your why, what gets you out of bed in the morning. It doesn't matter your title, right? It doesn't matter, how you got to do what you're doing, right? But it's the purpose and the mission that drives you every day. Next slide, please. So when you think about your personal brand, especially in the context of navigating a job hunt, right, you should always be asking, why should I hire you, right? Your personal brand should answer that question, right? So a potential employer is always looking at a potential candidate, as they're looking for their right fit, right? They're looking to answer that question, why should I hire you? So it's our job, right, as a job seeker, to really be able to answer that question for the employer, right? So it should answer three, crucial questions, right? Who you are, what do you excel at, how do you do it uniquely, right? This is a concise narrative, right, that really encapsulates your unique value, your promise of value, right? This is your reputation, right? So your personal brand is about your unique promise of that value, what you bring to the table in only the way that you can, right? It's about getting your employer or clients the solution, right? To see you as the only solution to their problems, right? So again, it's identifying your strengths, identifying your passions, your why, what people can come to expect of you, right? And how you lead, right? So to break that down, next slide, please. Your brand statement, right, should be defined by answering these following questions, right? What do you excel at? So that's really identifying your unique value. What do you do well, right? What are your strengths? What do you do so well that's sort of a natural strength to you that you can do it without even thinking about it, right? What are you the best at, right? Who do you serve? Who's your audience, right? Who gets to benefit from working with you? Who gets to benefit from the solutions that you bring forward, right? And then how do you do it? How do you do it uniquely, right? So going back to that golden circle, this is your process. This is your method for getting to results, right? So your brand statement should be a summary, right? That sums up your unique promise of value, right? And it's distinct to you and you alone. And like you said, right? There's no one else on earth that has the same experience that you do and has walked the same exact footsteps as you have, right? So what within your career, what within your experiences, both personal and professional, right, can add value, right? How can you look at the experiences that you've had as a value add, right? That employers cannot wait to work with you, that see no one else, right, besides you to help them deliver on a solution, right? So these are the things that I want us to be thinking about when it comes to building out our brand. Next slide, please. So bringing that personal brand to life, right? So it's infused with passion, right? So what are the things that you are passionate about? These absolutely should be incorporated into your personal brand. Things that you can't wait to get to each day, that you feel cheated when you don't get the opportunity to do it, right? So as Scott mentioned earlier, before we started, right, I'm a writer, right? Writing is one of my passions. It's something that I've developed a very long time ago and continue to do to this day, right? But I know that if I don't get to write, right, I feel cheated. I feel like I haven't been able to work on the things that I enjoy doing, right? So think about that for yourself. What is your passion? What's the thing that lights your soul on fire? Maybe it's something that you have gotten away from, right? And you haven't had the opportunity to do it in some time, and maybe you want to bring it back into your career, right? Or incorporating it somehow, right? So thinking about what are the things that light you up, right? That you lose control of time, you lose all, sense of time when you're immersed in this activity, right? And again, I just want to note that when it comes to your passions and the things that you do well, it doesn't have to be a hard skill or a soft skill even, right? Maybe you're someone with a great sense of humor and you really enjoy making someone laugh, right? So you bring that into the conversation, you bring that into your interaction with your coworkers and your colleagues, right? And they know you for having this really great sense of humor. Again, people like to work with people that they like and that they trust, right? And so having that passion for making other people laugh or for solving problems, even solving puzzles, right? These are the things that you want to articulate when it comes to your personal brand. Your strengths, right? These are your strong characteristics, your qualities, your skills. When was the last time you did a deep dive and inventory of what are your skills? What are your strengths? What are the things that you do really well? Some of these things might be things that you haven't even thought of as a strength because they come so natural to you, right? So think about what has somebody complimented you on lately, right? What are the things that you do so well that come really natural to you that may be a little bit harder for someone else, right? These elements, combined together is what creates your uniqueness, right? So thinking about how would others describe you, right? What is the uniqueness that this is a tough one sometimes for a lot of folks, when we think about, what is the thing that sets us apart? What are the things that make us unique, right? Sometimes you have to dig a little bit, right? But what are some of the things that other people would say about you? How would others describe you, right? So these are the things that make you stand out in the crowd, right? So it's worth really doing that deep dive, right? What are the things that make me different, in this approach? Next slide, please. Okay. So I have up here an exercise, right? We won't have time to go through this exercise today, but I definitely encourage you on your own time, feel free to take a screenshot of this slide, or you'll also have copies of the slides as well. But I want you to do this on your own time, right? So this is an exercise of helping you to identify some of the words that you would use to describe you, right? So I would recommend in a Google Doc, right? Or even in a notepad, for folks who like to write things down like me, I have a million different notepads. I want you to write a list of words that you believe describe you well. What are those words, right? You can start with a list of top 10, right? And from that list, I want you to choose 3 words, right, that describe your brand. Maybe it's mission driven, maybe it's creative, maybe it's analytical, right? What are the top 3 words that you would identify? And then I want you to find the definition. How does the dictionary define that word, right? Just so we really, understand, how is this word looked at, right? So creative, original thinking, resulting from imagination, someone who puts a creative spin to everything that they do, right? What's the textbook definition of those 3 words that you've identified, right? And then lastly, I want you to specifically say, why would a company be interested in hiring me with this attribute, right? What is it about creativity that would make me valuable to an employer, right? So this is how it should look. Next slide, please. When you have your notepad out, you have on the left there your list of keywords, the textbook definition, and why it would be valuable to an employer, right? So looking at that last column there, why would a creative attribute be valuable to an employer, right? So the example says here, I can come up with actionable ideas on the fly. I did this routinely as a social media content creator and increased click-through rates by 10%, right? So this practice actually helps you, right, to really understand how your attributes are valuable to an employer. It's like, oh, actually my creativity is really impactful. I helped my employer do X, Y, Z in my last role, right? And so I know that I can do this. I have proven myself, and I can do this in a new role, right? So this is a great exercise for yourself to, again, really identify what those keywords are so that when you're in front of an employer in an interview setting, right, you can call on those words quickly, right, and articulate without blinking why it would be valuable to an employer. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show here just a couple of words just to whet your palate a little bit on, words that you can use to describe yourself. This is by no means an exhaustive list here, but just to kind of get your juices flowing with, words that might describe you. Confident, right? Exciting, entrepreneurial, which is really a great skill set to have, creative, flexible. The list goes on, right? So obviously you don't need to limit yourself to just this list here, but just for you to start thinking about what are some words that you can pull from this list to start really defining your unique value. Next slide, please. Okay. So I want to go through another example here with you. Again, we won't have time to go through this again, but this is your homework assignments coming away from this talk today. And that's a personal branding 360-degree check, right? So what does that mean, right? Sometimes people see things in us that we don't see in ourselves, right? They can reflect back things about us and how we show up in the world that maybe, we overlooked or is in our blind spot, right? So this is how we can lean into our community, our network or circle of friends and colleagues, right? To really help us define and evaluate what are some of the qualities that show up, right? That they believe is valuable to an employer, right? So this is an exercise that I recommend to help you kind of see how do other people see me, right? So I want you to think about 6 people in your life right now. This can be former managers, they can be friends, family, again, people that are closest to us that can testify, to how they see us. Maybe you've worked, together before, right? So it's good to get a mix of both personal and professional people to include in this exercise, right? I want you to ask them, what are 3 words that they would use to describe you? 3 words, right? And so sometimes when you get those words back, you're going to be a little bit surprised to see, oh, I didn't know that you saw that in me. I remember when I did this exercise, this was a number of years ago, one of the things that people said that they saw in me was leadership, right? And so this word was something that came up often, right? So it was really helpful to see that people saw leadership qualities within me, right? So it's a really, really great exercise. You'll start to see people, use words to, define that they would use to describe you, and they usually are positive, right? So sometimes when you're getting those words back on how people see you, it can be a really good confidence boost, especially when you're navigating the job search, right? So as you're building out that list, right, I want you to create a list and identify words that repeat themselves, right? Maybe leadership comes up a number of times and people see you as that. Maybe creative is something that comes up that people are noticing about you, right? So I want you to highlight those words that really stick out. And then what do you do next with those words? Next slide, please. I want you to be an investigator of your own self, right? So evaluate the data, right? So looking at the keywords that you listed, the textbook version, and how those words would be valuable to an employer, right? So I want you to compile all of those words, plus the words that you've received, from that external 360 exercise. I want you to scan your findings, right? So this is going to take some time to do that, but really sit with it. Scan your findings, notice any words or phrases that reoccur, right? That are, commonly used. And what are the 5 words or themes that you strongly identify with? I want you to highlight those or circle those, right? Those are going to be the ones that pop out, that really stick out to you. And you're going to make sure when you're defining or when you're crafting out your personal brand statement, that those words or phrases are also reflected in your brand statement, right? So it becomes easier to actually define what your personal brand is because you will have done the work already in compiling those keywords and themes. Right? So let's look at an example of how that could look like, right? So going back to our original example, right? We see here as Delia, right? She went from director to the tourism industry, right? So her personal statement reads as a dedicated, driven professional with knowledge and experience in corporate and international development industries. My career is showcased by a track record in fulfilling the missions, objectives, and goals of organizations. With a unique grasp on Western and African work environment, I have sharp insight combined with extensive work experience in both regions, right? So we can see from this statement here, all of her skill sets, all of her strengths, her passions are articulated here, her experiences, right? So it makes it really easy to craft that personal statement once you have those keywords to fill in there, right? Again, this is about storytelling, right? And understanding what is the story that you want to tell, how do you uniquely define yourself, and how it will be valuable to future employers. Right? Next slide, please. Okay, so now that you've done all this work on your personal brand statement, right? So side note, when it comes to building your personal brand, this is something that it can't be done in just one setting, right? It's something that you really have to stick with and really just carve out dedicated time to doing, right? But I promise you, it'll all pay off in the end, because these are some areas where you might be able to use your personal brand statement, right? So now that you've created that statement, right, where are some spaces that you can use that statement? So for example, your LinkedIn bio. Hopefully everyone here is on LinkedIn. But your LinkedIn bio is prime real estate. Again, that's where your employer is going to learn a little bit more about you. So you want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date and reflects your career and personal brand identity, right? So integrating your brand statement, right, in the LinkedIn bio gives a visible sort of snapshot, right, to your unique value, your career experience, your career path to date, right? Also your resume, right? Your resume is another place where your personal brand statement can live, right at the top. You know, when you're articulating your career summary, this is also a really great place to put your personal brand statement. It just really does provide that cohesive narrative that ties your experiences together. And when it comes to your resume, you know, your personal brand statement or your career summary, that's one of the first things that employers or recruiters are going to see. So we want to make sure that it stands out. Your elevator pitch, right? So, you know, naturally on an interview, you're likely to get the question, tell me about yourself, or why are you interested in this role? So this is a great opportunity for you to incorporate your personal brand statement in with your elevator pitch, right? So again, making it really easy for the employer to know why you're a good fit for the role, right? So it also is helpful when you're making a new connection, when you're networking, which we're going to talk about in just a second. Those brief moments where you need to make a lasting impression, right? That's why they call it an elevator pitch, right? Enrich with your personal brand. It really gets to the heart of who you are, right? Your values and what you bring to the table. We mentioned interviews. Again, when you're face to face with that employer, having, you know, your personal brand statement on hand, be able to articulate who you are and why you're valuable to the role and to the company as a whole, right? Your website, your portfolio, for those of you who have, you know, their own website, again, that's going to be a great place to put your personal brand statement, your bio, for folks who want to learn a little bit more about you. Your personal brand statement will go greatly on your website or your portfolio. Next slide, please. All right. And so, as I mentioned, when it comes to your personal brand, this is something that's going to continue to evolve over time, right? As long as you are, you know, moving forward on your career goals, your personal brand is going to be shaping and evolving. It's going to change shape over time, and that's okay. It's supposed to. Your brand will continue to develop and evolve just as you will, right? You might, you know, take on new skills. You might take on new experiences or have new experiences, right? So the more you grow and acquire new skills and experiences, the more your brand will grow. But if you do find that there are certain traits that you would like to aspire towards, maybe you want to develop out your leadership qualities, maybe you want to develop out collaboration, innovation, right? And you're looking for opportunities to do that. Consider ways that you can develop that trait, you know, by seeking out these opportunities. You know, maybe you're taking on a course, or maybe you're taking on side projects or doing some volunteer work, right? So what are some ways that you can start to activate or be proactive, you know, in building out your personal brand and developing those qualities that you don't feel is quite there yet? So considering the ways that you can develop that. Next slide, please. All right. So now we've talked about personal branding, we're going to get a little bit into the heart of networking, which is, again, when it comes to marketing yourself and navigating the job search, these are one of the things that I cannot stress enough, that networking needs to be a part of your strategy. And it is one of the things that you should be focusing on each week, right? Next slide, please. So I know a lot of us here are, familiar with networking, understand the importance of it, why it's critical, it's crucial to your job search. But in navigating challenging times, right, things happen within your career. Whether it's a cancer diagnosis, you're dealing with something, in the world even, or at home in your personal life, right? You don't have to go through it on your own, right? So having a supportive network is going to be your compass and your guide towards this growth and success, right? So it's going to be that crucial anchor, right? So whether you're a cancer patient or a survivor, caregivers, this network becomes crucial to lean into, particularly when you're navigating a career change as well. So on the tactical side, when it comes to networking, you look on, job listings on LinkedIn or Indeed. Job listings tend to attract a lot of applicants, right? You'll see multiple people looking at the same listing. But when you're networking, in addition to submitting your application, that builds on connections and relationships that might be able to open doors for you, right? So networking is also the best way to gain confidence and learn about yourself, learning from other professionals, right? Reinforcing the work that you're doing, knowing what's new in your industry, being able to talk shop with other folks who are in your industry as well, receiving advice and other resources from other professionals, right? This is a chance to also practice your elevator pitch, right? Especially when you're making those new connections and preparing for those job search or for those job interviews, right? So networking is going to come in really handy around that. And so according to HubSpot, right, 85% of jobs were found through networking and through personal referrals, right? So the numbers don't lie, right? Having set, a targeted strategy around network and integrating that as part of your job search strategy, it's going to be really, really, really helpful, in opening up new opportunities that you may not know existed. Next slide, please. And so I always mention this because it's part of my personal experience here, but feel free to share in the chat. Are you anxious about networking, right? What scares you when it comes to networking? What are some things that make you nervous, right? Who here is a little bit nervous about networking, right? So putting yourself out there can be a little daunting. We're often taught to not force connections, or we don't want to feel like we're imposing. And of course, all of those beliefs are understandable, right? But a shift in mindset helps us to look at it a little bit differently, right? So knowing that networking is a two-way street, right? It's about giving and receiving value, right? Understanding what your strengths are, how can you help each other, right? We're living in a day and age now that we need each other, right? To move forward in our career goals, right? So shifting our mindset to how can I be of service? How can I bring value to a new connection that also might be able to bring value to me, right? So knowing that this is a two-way street. We're running a little low on time and there's a few things I have to get through. So we're gonna quickly speed through here. So next slide, please. So getting creative in how and when you network. There's no one way to network, right? You can network at the supermarket while you're picking up produce for dinner tonight, right? You might happen to strike up a conversation with someone who might be, a helpful connection to have, right? So thinking about what are the ways that you can forge and build new connections, right? So I listed here, online networking as well as in-person, both very effective. LinkedIn is going to be your best friend when making new connections, building new relationships with people in your industry, navigating LinkedIn groups, participating in the conversation. Next slide. We have networking hubs in the form of Meetup, meetup.com if you've ever gone on Meetup, Eventbrite. These are all going to be really great platforms for you to plug into your industry. You can put in a quick search for different industry events that are happening near you, right? And looking at that as an opportunity to join in and be a part of that conversation and meet new people. Okay, next slide, please. So reaching out to someone that you have in common with. I'm always going to recommend reaching out to people that you know first. It makes the lift feel a little bit less daunting, less heavy, right? When you think about people who are already in your network, right? Who you can follow up with. Maybe it's a long time since you last connected with them. So who in your network could you reach out to, right? To update them on opportunities that you're looking for and changes in your career that might be able to help open doors for you. Next slide, please. Informational interviews. So when we think about informational interviews, it's about understanding a little bit more about the companies that you're interested in. So if there's a job listing that you're interested in applying for, who at the company would be able to sit with you or have a 15-minute coffee chat with to learn a little bit more about the company, right? So getting a little bit of feedback on the company's culture, what skill sets are the employers looking for? How can you use that conversation in an informational interview to open up new opportunities and to build new connections? Next slide, please. Getting an informational interview. So I'm going to kind of cruise through here. So again, starting with people you already know, looking at LinkedIn, right? There's a lot of activity and conversations already happening on LinkedIn. Get into those professional groups, comment on different posts that are interesting to you, or start your own conversation online, right? So again, these are great opportunities for you to build new connections and take those online conversations offline. All right. And we're going to go to the next slide, please. So researching the person that you're going to be speaking with during that informational interview, think about questions that you might have for them. What is the format you want to be able to have this interview with? Preparing questions that you want to ask to make the most of the time that you have with that person. On the next slide, please. I have a few example questions that you might want to ask in an informational interviews to maximize the time that you have together. So again, tell me about yourself. What's it like working at XY company? What's the culture like? What are some frustrations that you have about the job? What should I be aware of as someone who's interested in working at this company? And always, always, always ask if there's anyone else that they recommend you should talk to, right? So that will allow you to continue to build on those relationships and make new connections, right? And that person can share any other names or connections that they think that you should be having. Okay. So just a quick deep dive through content creation. This is just kind of some pro tips if you're thinking about building out your thought leadership, particularly as a job search candidate. Next slide, please. Building out your brand. It's a powerful, powerful strategy. Again, employers are going to look at your LinkedIn or anything online about you. So you really want to position yourself as an authority and build credibility in your field, right? So content creation is your avenue and your best way forward in developing that, right? So it's shown that candidates who have an active blog or a content platform tend to receive 43% more job opportunities, right? So this doesn't mean you have to build out a completely, robust content brand strategy. No. It just means maybe that you're popping on LinkedIn every now and then to share a new update, to share, opportunities that you're looking for and industry insight. Again, always be thinking about how can I share value with my network. Next slide, please. So industry insights, how-to guides, tutorials, these are all fair game when you're building out your content strategy. Earlier in my career, as I mentioned, I'm a writer. So one of my ways of building out content thought leadership was through blogging, right? So if you're someone who enjoys the writing process, definitely consider, how you might start a blog on LinkedIn or your own blog. You can do interviews, Q&A sessions, use social media content. Sky's really the limit on how you want to build out your thought leadership. This can be something that you aim to develop, long term, because building out your content thought leadership is something that you have to consistently be working at over time. So keeping your eye on the long view of your career. How do you want to build out your thought leadership platform? What is it that you want to be known for? And what is the best medium for you based on your strengths and your passions to be able to deliver that content, right? So something to think about here. Next slide, please. And just to kind of tie everything together, I'm curious from you, right? What are some takeaways that you're having from this conversation. I know I threw a lot of information at you here, but would love for you to just pop in the chat. What's one thing that you're taking away from today's discussion on personal branding and networking? Next slide, please. And then what's one thing that you're going to do this week? All right, what's one thing that you're going to do this week, right? So working on crafting your personal brand statement, updating your LinkedIn profile, maybe you're inviting someone to an informational interview, sign up to one networking event happening this month or next month, right? The key is to keep the momentum going, right? Do one small thing every single day, right? And that is going to be the momentum that's going to bring you forward, right? So I know that was a lot of information. We kind of breezed through it, but I want to invite you all, next slide, please, to, in the spirit of networking, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy and excited to make new connections and hear your story. But let's continue to build out our networks and our connections and relationships within this field and beyond, and really lean into each other and how we can be of support to each other. And next slide. Last but not least, I just want to share a few resources that has been impactful and helpful both to myself and to my clients. I want to direct your attention to the book on the right, Build Your Dream Network. This is by a personal friend of mine, Kelly Hoey. Highly recommend her book, as well as Adam Grant. He's also a thought leader in this space and has a great episode on networking that I think you'll enjoy, and his book on give and take. So with that, I'm going to thank you again for sitting through and having this conversation with me. And I hope to hear from you again. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But with that said, I'll pass it back to you, Scott.
Thank you so much, Ariane. That was unbelievable. So much information to digest. I learned things I hope everybody else did. Before we get into Q&A, just a few more quick housekeeping things. We have some upcoming events that you can see on this slide. We have our full list of webinars for 2024. The first three are listed here. The first one will be Managing Long-Term Stress, which is going to be on January 24th. It's a great presentation to start the year off and kind of center and balance ourselves out. We hope you'll join us for that. We also have our Midwest conference coming up on March 22nd. That's an all-day conference. It's taking place on Zoom. It's just happening in Midwest time zone, but anyone is welcome to join. And then we hope you can follow us on social media. There's my email too. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me as well. And then I will just leave this last slide up for anyone requesting CEs. These are the requirements for that. So Ariane, a few questions. Well, a lot of questions have come in. Thank you, everybody. If we don't get to your question today, please shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we will get you a one-on-one answer to anything we don't get to today. So the first question I have here is, when should one send a thank you for the interview, and is it a good idea? Is it a good opportunity to use your elevator pitch?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We didn't talk about that today, but the thank you note is especially important. It's particularly on the interview process. So I definitely recommend sending a thank you note as soon as you finish the interview, and do it on each round of the interview. As best as you can, send that thank you note to the panel of interviewers that have interviewed you. You can connect with them or have their information, either connect with them on LinkedIn, or you can ask the recruiter to share their information. But I highly recommend the thank you, because sometimes if it boils down to just two candidates that are vying for the same position, the one that didn't send the thank you note, probably, compared to the one that did, they're going to go with the one that put that extra thought and attention in sending that note. So
yeah, absolutely. We also recommend sending an individual email to every individual person you meet with. So if you meet with 2 or 3 people in the same room, sending a different email to everybody really goes a long way and makes them feel like you're responsible, you can follow up, et cetera, et cetera. This one might be a little bit more for me, but feel free to jump in. How and when do you address a disability during the interview process? Like Ariane pointed out earlier, disclosure is an extremely personal decision, and everybody has different reasons to disclose or not to disclose. So it really is a completely personal choice. We usually recommend waiting till a little longer in the interview process before disclosing. But again, some people feel like they have to be upfront, or it's just some part of who they are, and they feel like they're going to be lying or withholding something, and they want to, in a cover letter, disclose their diagnosis, which, if that's the choice you make, is completely valid. But we'd like to, let them get to know you and your work capabilities and your personality before bringing in, cancer or a disability into that equation there.
1000% agree.
Let's see. I'm trying to get to as many as we can. We have 1 minute left. We're going to stay a few minutes after if you have a couple minutes, Ariane.
Yeah.
I had a really wonderful informational interview recently. Is it appropriate to follow up after a certain time has passed?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So those that you have the informational interview with, especially if you hit it off, you had a really great connection, that person maybe has agreed to support you in some way, absolutely keep that person on your radar. I would recommend saying to that person, even in the conversation of that informational interview, would it be okay if I followed up with you at XYZ date? So that could be 2 weeks from now, that could be even a month from now, right? But letting them know that, hey, I'd like to stay on your radar. I'd like to continue this conversation. Would it be okay? Right. So I think absolutely stay on the radar, continue to follow up with them. I would just say for your own organization as well, keep track of folks that you have conversations with too, and the date that you've had conversations with them. Mark it in your calendar so you won't forget. You'll set a little reminder for yourself to follow up on that lead, because that's oftentimes, unfortunately, the thing that I see most is that when we have a great connection with someone, it falls to the wayside, or life happens and we forget about it and things like that. And people are busy too. So setting that reminder to follow up and stay on their radar is definitely recommended.
Yeah, and I think the more you think about, they're now in your network too. So you want to keep them as long as you can. So even if you get a job at a different company, I think it's worth sending an email saying, hey, thank you so much. I just wanted to let you know I got hired at blank organization. I really appreciate all the information you gave me and really put me in the right path, or something. It can be 2 sentences, but just keeps them thinking of you. And if something comes down the line, you never know what could come from anything. Okay, the final question I have here, and again, if we couldn't get to your question today, we're so sorry. Please shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org. Even if you didn't submit a question, if you think of something later tonight or next week or next month, we're always around to offer one-on-one support. The last question I have here is, how often should I be creating content? Is there a sweet spot to try to achieve?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So again, that's going to depend on your bandwidth, your capacity. I think that you'll probably see a lot of information that you have to be posting all the time, every day, and that's great if you can do it. Personally, I don't post all that often. I do once a week, once a month, even. I think it depends on, again, your bandwidth and your capacity to stick to a schedule. I do think that consistency is important here. So if you do decide to post content weekly, try as best you can to stick to that schedule, because building that consistency also goes in hand with building that trust and credibility. So having a cadence that works best for you, whether it's weekly or monthly, sticking to that, doing it for a month, 3 months, and then you can assess after 3 months and see if you want to do more content daily or reevaluate the timing for that. But I would just recommend decide what works for you and just stay consistent.
I think it also depends on what kind of content you're doing. You know, if it's like sharing a news article, that's something that's easy and you can do every
For
day.
sure.
If you're writing, you know, a blog or a complex video that needs editing and all that kind of stuff, like that obviously is not going to be possible to do every day, but you know,
Exactly.
quality and quantity are, you know,
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? Balancing.
Yes, quality over quantity. We don't want to slap anything just to slap it up there. But I think, you know, to your point, Scott, just what's the easiest thing that you can do? You know, whether it's an article that you read or a podcast episode, it's, you know, it takes 2 seconds to just reshare that with your network, add a little comment to it. And that can also be built into your content strategy too.
Exactly. Well, Ariane, thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you all of you for joining us. And we hope to see you in 2024. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me. Take good care.